does anyone else different time? But I think everyone is here except for Lois. And for those of you who don't know, Lois has caught the virus, and we're so sorry to hear that. We hope she has a light case, recovers quickly. But please pass along our best to Lois, Adrian.
Chairwoman, I just talked with Lois. She sounds rested. I did send her well wishes, and she says, I'm feeling better today, and I'll get there as soon as I can. So I did pass that on. She had the nerve to say, "Do you need me?" I'm like, "No, Lois, we got everything under control. We'll keep this shit moving."
Okay. Commissioner Carter, are you here today? Carter. Okay, I'll move on. Donna Davis.
Yes, I'm here.
Mitch Gillespie.
Here.
John McAdams.
Here.
Meg.
I'm here.
Patricia Harris.
Here.
Charles Carter.
Here.
Thank you. So we do officially have a quorum, and I'll also acknowledge that since this is being recorded, we also have attending Chairman Myberg, Council Philip Reynolds. Do I see Director Smith online? Yes. Director Chief Karen Higgins, John Heisman, one of our presenters, Forrest Shepard, one of our presenters, Trish Darkont, one of our presenters, Adrian Weaver, and I believe those are all of the presenters and participants today. So welcome to this meeting of the North Carolina Environmental Management Commission's Water Quality Committee. My name is Marion Deerhake, Chairman of the committee, and you have already heard committee members in attendance today during our roll call, as well as our staff supporting today's meeting. Today we'll hear the November meeting minutes to approve. We have one action item and two information items, and we'll review and discuss one of our committee's agenda items for tomorrow's full EMC meeting, which is the Chowan plan. This meeting is being held via WebEx with a phone-in option for all participants and other attendees. It's important to note that this meeting will be conducted as are our other EMC meetings, in that only EMC members and those called upon by the Water Quality Committee Chairman will be recognized to speak. This meeting is being recorded, and minutes will be prepared for review and approval at the committee's next regularly scheduled March 2021 meeting. So we begin with the conflict of interest statement. North Carolina General Statute 163A-159E mandates that the chair inquire as to whether any member knows of any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to matters before the Environmental Management Commission's Water Quality Committee. If any member knows of a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict, please state so at this time. The record will show that no one spoke. So we move on to approval of the November 18th Water Quality Committee meeting minutes. I hope all of the members have had the opportunity to review the minutes, and I'll entertain a motion for approval, or if you find any adjustments that are needed.
Madam Chairman, this is Donna Davis. I move approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Do I have a second?
This is Pat Harris. I second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Harris. Any discussion about the minutes? All those in favor of the minutes by roll call. Commissioner Carter.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Gillespie,
Aye.
Commissioner McAdams,
Aye.
Commissioner Monas,
Aye.
Vice Chair Harris.
Aye.
And we have a majority vote, and the minutes are approved as written. Thank you. So now we move to section 2 of the agenda, which is a request for approval to the EMC with the Falls Lake Model Program for existing development stormwater. Presenting is John Heisman with the Division of Water Resources Non-Point Source Planning Branch. So we'll hear his presentation and then take questions and entertain a motion.
Yeah, they'll move him to the
You are, John.
yeah, let me move him to the presenter here.
Okay.
I'm just waiting to be able to share my content over there, Shelton. Okay, let's see here. All right. All right, you all should be seeing my presentation now. Does that look good to you, Shelton?
We can see it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Great. Thanks, everybody. Again, Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Heisman. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday. It's good to see you all today. I'm with the Division of Water Resources Non-Point Source Planning Branch, and I'm here today to present the Falls Lake Model Program for Existing Development Stormwater. You will recall I've provided information updates, information items on this document at the September and November meetings. And today I'm here as an action item requesting to bring this document, requesting permission to bring this document to the full commission tomorrow for approval. I also wanted to add that as I go through the presentation today, we also have Mr. Forrest Westall, the Executive Director of the Upper News River Basin Association, on the line. This has been a highly collaborative process, and at the end, if you have any questions for myself or Mr. Westall about the collaboration, I'm happy to chime in there. So I just want to give a quick overview of the requirements of the Falls Lake Stage 1 existing development requirements. And basically, this rule requires in Stage 1, all the local governments in the Falls Lake watershed implement a load reduction program that would offset the nutrient loading from lands developed between 2006 and 2012. 2006 is the baseline for Falls, and 2012 is when all of the Falls local governments had new development stormwater programs in place. So this rule captures all that development and the loading from the development, that existing development that occurred in that what we call an interim time period between 2006 and 2012. The rule also calls for the division to develop a model program that those local governments can use as a guide to develop their local reduction programs. The rule called for the model program to be presented to the EMC, and we did bring it back in 2013 to the EMC. And at the time, implementation was postponed. What we did was we requested the EMC at that time give it back to us to allow us to continue to working with stakeholders to expand the toolbox of available measures that they would have at their disposal to get reductions. So since 2013, DWR has continued to collaborate with the local governments to expand that toolbox of available nutrient-reducing practices, also working with them to develop preliminary jurisdictional loads, the loads that we estimate to have to offset in Stage 1, and also working very closely with the Upper News River Basin Association on a proposal they have for an interim alternative implementation approach that we refer to as the IAIA. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail in a few slides. So again, the purpose of the model program is to provide guidance in the development of the local load reduction programs that the local governments would implement. The model program provides interpretive guidance and interpretive guidance for technical decisions that need to be made. And it also identifies minimum elements that need to be included in the local programs per the rule. A really important aspect of the model program is that it recognizes two compliance options. One is the individual program. That's where a local government develops their own local program to achieve their load reductions within their jurisdiction. And the other is a joint compliance approach that allows local governments to work together to reduce their collective reductions together. And this is the rule language that allows for that, where municipalities have the option of working together and with counties to combine their reduction needs and work together to reduce them. So there's an individual option and a joint compliance option for implementing reductions. The model program in the first section also includes a preliminary estimate of the stage 1 load reduction needs. And this was simply provided to illustrate the scale of the reduction needs in stage 1. We present it as a range for the watershed in total nitrogen and total phosphorus pounds per year. And that range was developed by using numbers developed by the local governments and the Division of Water Resources. And the differences basically reflect some differences in the methods that we use to develop those ranges. But these represent the range of load reductions that would be needed in stage 1 for the watershed for nitrogen and phosphorus by the end of stage 1. And the end of stage 1 has been pushed out through legislation. Basically, stage 1 continues until the rules are readopted, and that rules readoption process will begin in 2024. So stage 1 is likely going to end sometime around 2026, 27, possibly 2028, but probably about 2027. The important point to remember here is that if any local government chooses to do the individual option, they would have to work with a division to finalize their jurisdictional load to include in their stage 1 load reduction program. Section 2 of the model program, this is where we lay out the required elements for those local programs. Here's where the local government would provide their final estimated stage 1 load reduction need, which we refer to as that jurisdictional load, and we would work with them on finalizing that number. They would also provide a measures opportunity assessment. This is where they would provide some sort of an evaluation of opportunity of load reduction potential for various practices to achieve those reductions towards that jurisdictional load. And they would do this evaluation of practices based on, there's a table within the rule that contains nutrient reducing practices that were identified at the time. That list was just what was identified back in when the rules were readopted in 2011. We have a full list of approved nutrient reduction practices provided in the division's credit catalog. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I also want to mention I have some slides in reserve if people have some specific questions at the end of the presentation about the catalog. But essentially, the catalog is a companion reference document that will be posted to the division's website that contains a complete list of all the division-approved nutrient-reducing practices, which rules that can be used for direct compliance, which ones can be traded. And basically, it's a reference, a one-stop reference for anybody looking for a full list of nutrient-reducing practices available to them to achieve reductions under the nutrient strategy rules. So along those lines, the local program would also include an implementation plan that identifies not only the practices that they plan to implement, but the types of activities and the lands affected, the types of existing development lands that those practices would affect, and provide a prioritization of the practices, provide estimates of the magnitude and duration of the reductions expected from those practices. They would also lay out their reporting plan for developing annual progress reports on their implementation to submit to the division annually. Section 3 of the model program is where we provide guidance on calculating those stage 1 load reduction needs. This simply provides like the spatial extent of the development analysis. Again, that interim development period is 2006 to 2012. We would want them to note any assumptions made, resources that they use, and tools used to develop their calculations. We provide a section specifically about calculating the stormwater loads, because Existing development loads are kind of broken down into two sectors, from stormwater runoff and on-site wastewater loads. So we provide guidance on calculating the stormwater loads, using the DWR approved tools to calculate pre and post-development loads. They have the option of using a pre-development loading rate if they don't have records for their pre-development loads. And also, of course, they would get credit for any SCMs or nutrient offsets that were already implemented. We also provide guidance on calculating on-site wastewater loads, where they would identify the number of on-site systems installed during that interim period, determine the malfunction rates, and calculate the loads using the numbers, type, and household size, and provided effluent rates that we reference in the catalog. Section 4 is where we discuss the joint compliance approach. And this is a really important section because the entire model program has been provided for public comment and developed through collaboration. And Section 4 has had a lot of focus between DWR and working closely with the UNRBA on developing the language in this section. And this section, again, addresses that joint compliance option. This is a voluntary implementation option where parties can merge the reductions and meet the goals collectively. Again, this is a merging of municipalities and counties, the reduction needs, and allowing for merging of the reductions needs for both existing development and wastewater in the watershed. The UNRBA proposal is for an interim, what they're calling an interim alternative implementation approach, the IAIA. And what this does is it combines the wastewater over reductions in falls. The falls 3 wastewater treatment plants are doing really well and well below their stage 1 goals. So it combines the wastewater over reductions in falls with the existing development reduction needs. And what this does is, combined, they're below their stage 1 reduction needs, but ensures that they continue to implement practices to improve water quality in stage 1. So this ensures additional practices implemented in stage 1, and it de-emphasizes pounds accounting. And what this does is this provides flexibility to implement different types of practices where we don't necessarily, we do know that they have water quality benefit, but we don't necessarily have credit pounds accounting established for them yet. These are things like, fixing leaky infrastructure, fertilizer ordinances, land preservation, things where there's water quality benefit that's not yet quantified. The local governments participating in this program would track pounds to the extent that they can, but basically the compliance is determined by committing to a fixed amount of money spent on projects each year. There would also be a reporting component where the individual participants would submit individual annual reports, and there would be a joint summary report for the complete group that's participating in the IAIA. This section also lays out the process for terminating participation in the joint approach should somebody choose to drop out. It is a 5-year commitment to be a part of the IAIA, and we would require them to provide advanced written notice to DWR and have a local program in place before they drop out, so there wouldn't be a lag in implementation. Section 5 is really just about process of developing and implementing the plans, and we lay out the timelines. And here is where the way the rule is set up, when I bring assuming I bring the model program to the EMC tomorrow and they approve it, it gives the local government 6 months to submit their local programs, which would be July 2021. And they have to both submit those local programs then and actually begin implementing those programs. So in July 2021, whether they're doing a local individual program or being part of that joint compliance approach, that program would be submitted in July and implementation would begin then in July. Then under the rule, the division has an additional 14 months to provide recommendations to the EMC on approving those programs. Given the nature of all the collaboration on this and the long-term participation, we fully plan to make recommendations much sooner than that 15 months that's allowed for under the rules. So I just wanted to highlight that we do plan to expedite that. And then if the EMC did require any changes to the programs, it gives those participants 4 months to make any revisions and resubmit those, which would be about January 2023. Again, assuming everything is approved in September, full implementation of those approved programs, any changes that had to occur to those programs would occur in December 2022. And just to highlight here, again, the rules are scheduled to be readopted. The legislation requires that the EMC begin the rules readoption process in 2024. And given our experience with past rulemaking, figure that the rules would be adopted and in place by somewhere between 2026 and 2028. So stage 1 implementation for these programs would start in 2021, July 2021, when they're submitted, and continue through until the rules are readopted in 2026, 2028. So that gives you a sense of the timeline for the implementation. We also provide some guidance in section 5 about practice approval and site visits. DWR wouldn't be approving individual installation of practices, but we do require the notification of installation of practices, and basically those will be recorded in the annual reports that are submitted to the division. And practices are credited based on a presumptive credit that's in place for that approved method for that practice at the time the practice is put in place. And of course, the division can arrange for doing site visits to inspect these practices. We also provide some language in here just recognizing that there's, while the majority of practices have their presumptive credit that's available as soon as it's installed, if you're doing something like riparian reforestation on ag land, buffer restoration, that's done through the nutrient offset rule requirements, and that has a credit release schedule associated with that. Also address verification and audits. Again, the rule requires that the folks implementing practices are required to ensure the maintenance and proper functioning of these practices, and the programs should be field verifying and documenting the successful implementation of the practices that they put in place. And the division has the availability of conducting periodic program audits. Section 6 addresses the reporting requirements. Basically, annual reports will be submitted to the division each year that would address the activities that were implemented during the reporting period of between July 1st and June 30th of the reporting cycle. We lay out required information and requested information. Required information are things like changes in activities, practices that are initiated or terminated during that cycle, and the annual reductions or increases related to those projects, and summarizing the overall tracking of project progress in terms of load reductions achieved compared to the reduction target. We also requesting information in terms of inspection and maintenance activities, evaluation of implementation challenges that they may have encountered during their implementation in stage 1, and summarizing any anticipated activities that they have planned for the next reporting cycle. Section 7 of the model program provides some practice design and implementation requirements. And here is really just kind of, we summarize practice requirements from different sources and point to them in terms of where there's a stormwater design manual that provides guidance on practice design. And we also lay out things like the eligible practices for local programs. Basically, this is where we point to the nutrient catalog and that full list of available practices, and point out that additional practices can be proposed for approval using a measures approval process that's laid out in that catalog. This section, as I mentioned, basically points to existing requirements found in different areas. Like for SEMs, there's the minimum design specifications in the 2H rules. There's implementation requirements in DMLR's Stormwater Design Manual. And then nutrient credit specs are located in the SCM credit document and the Stormwater Nitrogen and Phosphorus Accounting Tool, the SNAP tool. In addition to SCMs, we have several DWR approved practices, things like cattle exclusion and street sweeping that have gone through an approval process and are posted to our website. And the design and implementation requirements for those practices are located in those documents, and we point to those in this section. There's also some additional practice design implementation requirements. We provide some just explanation here where SCM design is, we point out the credit differences for SCM design between new development and existing development, just recognizing that when you're talking about existing development, a lot of times we're talking about retrofitting SCMs. And these retrofit SCMs can be designed to handle, be undersized and oversized to handle volumes that are either 50% or 200% of their typical design design specs. So you can undersize or oversize based on the space limitations for these SCMs that you're retrofitting. Also, for the existing development, the existing load condition for the crediting is considered to be the reference condition that you're comparing it to. And then also we have some guidance in here about older installations that are being retrofitted and how to handle nested SCMs. And basically we point to this guidance that's included in the catalog. And when we're talking about nested SCMs, it's, you know, just addressing questions that have come up over the years where if somebody puts in an SCM in the watershed and gets credit for it, how is it handled if somebody comes in and puts an SCM further up in the watershed that impacts the flow to their SCM? And we just make it clear that you get your credit that was put in place at the time that the practice was implemented. This section also talks about trading and basically just pointing to the procedural requirements that are set in the nutrient offset rule and the falls trading rule, and pointing out that the trades and any type of activity and the duration and credit of those trades would be included in the annual reports. So that's a pretty basic overview of the model program. I know that was a lot of information, and I wanted to kind of pause here just to reiterate our requested action. We're asking today for the divisions requesting approval to proceed to the EMC with the Falls Lake model program for existing development stormwater. And I'm happy to take questions at this point. Again, I want to reiterate that I do have some additional slides in reserve about the credit catalog if people have questions about that, and just highlight that, again, this was a highly collaborative process with a lot of input from local governments in the Upper Neuse River Basin Association, and Forrest Westhall, the executive director of the UNRBA, is on the line if there's any questions for him as well. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, John. Do any of the members have questions before we move toward a motion? I will just try and view the screen, but right now it's set up in a way that I have to scroll through the screen to see if anyone's raising their hand. So, okay, I see Commissioner Magas raising her hand. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for this great presentation, John. And I really like the different options and appreciate the collaboration to achieve those options. I was wondering, you know, we've heard about the One Water approach before. Can you talk a little bit about how this may intersect with that approach and thinking on behalf of the division?
Sure, and I have to admit, I haven't been highly involved in the One Water discussions, but I know that it has come up in conversations about this model program and this alternative implementation approach. I mean, this approach, you know, it involved discussions with DWR, the stakeholder local governments, and NGOs, and that interest in kind of recognizing, yes, we have these management strategies in place for nutrient reductions, but recognizing that a lot of the practices that people implement to achieve those reductions, you know, have other water quality benefits. And in some cases, there's things that they're doing or already doing that have water quality benefits that we can't quantify. And that's where that alternative approach really kind of recognizes a full range of practices that you can implement towards improving water quality in the watershed, and not necessarily being encumbered by the restrictive view of just counting pounds, and looking at, like, holistically at the lake and water quality benefits that go beyond just nutrients. But of course, we do have to tie it in some way to the chlorophyll A and nutrients under the rules, but just it's really kind of provides a lot of additional flexibility and takes a more of a holistic approach at the watershed. So that's been a big part of the conversation, and it should be really interesting to see how well this works, because this, you know, if this is successful in Falls, and I have every reason to believe it will be, I think it could be a good model for looking at approaches under future strategies.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking that the alternative approach might be especially good for that, and also maybe the connection between water quantity and water quality. You know, I live in this watershed, and we've got a lot of flashy storm events, which are obviously not good in terms of quantity, but also water quality issues, flushing the nutrients through. And so there may be opportunities to get some of those win-wins there.
Right, great point.
Any other members have questions? Well, while you think for a moment, I'll make a couple of comments. One is that I'm always interested in the opportunities to quantify benefits, and I think there will be an opportunity with the information that's collected and presented here to quantify and value the co-benefits of ecosystem services achieved as these practices are installed and maintained. And you may not have noticed, but in the purpose statement of the original Falls rule, there is a reference to the term ecosystem services. So I encourage all of the participants in this program to work with staff, particularly the Ms. Vinilaro, who is now responsible for quantifying and valuing co-benefits, to identify for the future. I have one other comment, but let me ask again if any other members have questions or comments. I'm not hearing any. Okay, well, my last comment pertains to the verification side of it. And I bring this comment with my past experience with verification programs that I've supported EPA and others on, to just understand in the Chesapeake how they go about verifying the installation of BMPs for nutrient reductions. And I've talked with Mr. Heisman and Rich Gannon about this as they gave me some clarification to some of my questions that I had on the program, the model program document. And let me just say that Mr. Heisman helped me prepare this statement so that I could say it accurately. But I'm not asking for a revision to the document, but I do want to point out to members that with regard to item 7E of the Falls Lake Existing Development Rule, which requires local governments to, quote, independently maintain and ensure performance of implemented load reducing measures, unquote. I want to recommend that the individual local programs plans that will be submitted for commission approval in the future include their commitment that any stormwater control measures implemented for the purpose of credits toward a local program's load reduction need will have their performance re-verified at least every 10 years and be inspected on an annual basis. This is mentioned in the program document, but I would appreciate their committing to it in their program plans. Re-verification would consist of written affirmation from the local program of continued stormwater control measures function as designed based on a documented history of inspections. And I'd recommend that the division review the program submittals based on this standard of accountability. It's great when they install programs, and inspection and maintenance is important along the way, just reaffirming their commitment to that, but also to verifying the performance is maintained on these installed BMPs. So thank you for letting me explain that to you. Any other questions or comments from members? Open the floor for a motion to approve. I see Commissioner Monis' hand up.
I move to approve and proceed to the EMC with the Falls Lake Model Program for existing development stormwater.
Do we have a second?
I'm happy to second. John McAdams.
Thank you, Mr. McAdams. Is there any further discussion on this topic or this particular vote? Hearing none, I will go through a roll call vote. Please say yes or no, or aye or nay. Commissioner Carter. Commissioner Carter.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Gillespie,
Aye.
Commissioner McAdams,
Aye.
Commissioner Monas, Vice Chairman Harris.
Aye.
Does Chairman Myberg wish to vote?
Generally, no. It sounds like you have a good decision.
Yes.
I have a question. I have a question once the a procedural question once this is once the vote is recorded.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Myberg, and I want to talk about that too. So,
Right.
So we have the approval unanimously from the members, and so the program is approved by the Water Quality Committee to take forward to the EMC. Now, Chairman Myberg raised this question yesterday, this morning, last night, late last night, email, and I wanted to talk with you and get feedback from our council on this. His question was, tomorrow require a third. I was working under the assumption that this is not a rulemaking and the 30-day waiver applies to rulemaking actions, but would appreciate Council Reynolds' feedback on that. Would you like to add anything to that, Chairman Myberg?
Only that I'm sorry I didn't think to ask the question until late last night.
Okay, that's okay.
Madam Chair, this is Philip. I do not think that the Commission's 30-day bylaw applies to this.
Thank you. So this does not require a 30-day waiver by the Commission then?
No, ma'am, I don't see that it does.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chairman Myberg, for asking. It's always good to be certain.
Well, I never want to offend on form when I can offend on substance.
Okay, well, given that, we can complete this action and move on to the next item on our agenda. And that is Roman numeral 3, the January 14, 2021 agenda item. We have two action items on Thursday's EMC agenda, and the Water Quality Committee heard and acted on the Falls Lake Model Program today. The EMC will also be asked to act on the Chowan River Basin Plan. Final drafts of the Basin Plan following public comments go directly to the full EMC to approve and do not require further action by the Water Quality Committee itself. However, Commissioner Harris, our Vice Chairman of the committee, received, and she's also the liaison for the Chowan Basin, received on one of the plan's recommendations that she wishes to discuss in committee today. This follows a discussion with the plan writers and staff's work to develop a revision to the subject recommendation for the full EMC to consider tomorrow. So let me just tell you how this is discussion is going to go right now. I sort of laid out the steps here. First, I'll call on Vice Chairman Harris to describe the comment received on the plan recommendation. One, discussion with the staff, our discussion with the staff on Friday after that comment was received, and the revision that they have drafted so kindly for us to discuss today. And then Forrest Shepard, who will be presenting tomorrow the full plan, has those recommended revisions from Vice Chair Harris available on a PowerPoint post for us to look at today if we need them. And then after that, I will call for the committee's consensus approval to carry the recommended revisions to the EMC. I've seen some feedback today from members thinking that we maybe should vote formally instead of seeking consensus, but if I hear no objections, this was not an action item. Even though we are entitled to vote if you really want to, we could pass it on to the committee, full commission tomorrow with our consensus approval on the revision if you are agreeable to the revision. So given that, I will ask Vice Chair Harris to introduce the topic.
Let me be sure to unmute here. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief. Bottom line, I've had the opportunity to work on this plan, and I do want to acknowledge all those that were involved, because it was a lot of work. And this was just an item that popped up a little bit later, along with a few others, but this was the main one that caught my eye, which was basically a recommendation that you can find in the executive summary under water use and demand recommendations. That wishes to establish a statewide water withdrawal permitting program. A statewide water withdrawal permitting program would allow DWR the ability to better manage water resources in the state. And so I'll just read the comment I made, and it's just that many believe that if the EMC approves the draft Chowan River Basin Plan with this recommendation, the EMC in essence is supporting a statewide water withdrawal permitting program. And I do believe there's merit on both sides of that debate. We do have permitting programs in the state, but we don't have a statewide one. So with that, I believe the proposed Chowan River Plan is not the vehicle for this debate. And is the concern for the lack of data in the Chowan River. So with that, as Chairman Deerhake had informed you, we did meet with staff, and they did come up with some alternative language for our consideration. So with that, I think that's the biggest part to this, and I wanted to put this before the committee for your attention and discussion, given that this will come before the EMC tomorrow. So with that, Madam Chair, that's my brief comments on this issue.
Well, thank you. Shall we post the revisions so that members and the public can see what changes are going to be proposed by you? So Shelton, we need, if you will, to share with, let Forrest share his slides with us.
Okay. Forrest.
And members, I believe, also received copies of a Word document that contained the revisions too.
Okay, Forrest, you have the presenter. And you are muted. John, is Forrest presenting, or are you actually?
Here we go.
Oh, it's Forrest.
Okay, yeah. I'll unmute Forrest. Okay, Forrest, you're on.
So I don't know whether Forrest was planning to speak, or Vice Chair Harris, were you going to address it?
Unmute. I would like staff, if they're willing to do that, to go through these. I'll be glad to read these through, but it may be good for staff so that if any specific question comes up, they can answer or I can help, either way.
Okay. Forrest, would you please go ahead?
I'm happy to read the revisions as they are. We worked with staff in the water supply planning branch as well. So if any of them are on the line, if it's okay to extend a communication through them as well, that would be greatly appreciated. But the executive summary that was just read by Commissioner Harris has two recommendations within the original text. The first is to ensure that future water supply needs can be met and to identify conflicts or problems that need to be resolved. Information about water use needs to be collected from all water users. And the one that she read, which is establish a statewide water withdrawal permitting program. A statewide water withdrawal permitting program would allow DWR the ability to manage water resources or better manage water resources in the state. We have kept the first recommendation, but the second recommendation has been revised to the text on the right, which reads as complete data sets are needed to plan for long-term sustainability and to ensure all water users have adequate water to meet demand now and into the future. Information about water use needs to be collected from all water users in all sectors. DEQ and other state and federal agencies should increase efforts to resolve data gaps and compliance issues with reporting water use, as well as identifying any conflicts or problems that need to be resolved. So that's been the change to the executive summary. There were also changes in Chapter 8, and that's in Section 8.6 of the plan under future considerations. The original text reads, compliance with existing statewide programs dealing with water resources management appears to be reasonably effective at capturing major water withdrawals and use for most sectors. However, the lack of water withdrawal permitting in North Carolina creates a difficult scenario for DWR to confidently provide assistance across the state and ensure the long-term sustainability of water resources for all. Understanding the amount and quality of groundwater, accurate localized agricultural water use data, long-term river and reservoir gauges, and long-term surface water stream flow calculations are all critical to understanding how water use is being used and can be sustained into the future. The following identifies topics for state leaders to consider when answering questions about water resources management. The new revised text reads as, while compliance with existing statewide programs dealing with water resources management is reasonably effective at capturing major water withdrawals and uses for most sectors, there are still data gaps that make it difficult for DWR to provide assistance across the state and ensure the long-term sustainability of water resources for all users. Understanding the amount and quality of groundwater, having accurate localized agricultural water use data, having long-term river and reservoir gauges, and using long-term stream flow calculations are all critical to understanding how water is being used and how it can be sustained into the future. And the following identifies topics for state leaders to consider when addressing questions about water resources management. There were two other revisions to Chapter 8. And those can be found in Section 8.6.2 under localized agricultural water use data. The original text reads as, agriculture is a major user of ground and surface water in the United States. According to the 2018 Agricultural Water Use Survey published by the NCBA and CES, water use in the Chowan River Basin averages approximately 2.613 million gallons per day, with a withdrawal capacity that totals 49.189 million gallons per day. Due to federal and state confidentiality rules and statutes surrounding agricultural data, the information obtained during the Agricultural Water Use Survey may not be used for any purpose other than statistical purposes for which the information was supplied. Data is currently collected by NCBA and CS biannually. The data is then aggregated. In the aggregated form, it cannot be used to model local conditions or used to determine local impacts on water resources. Therefore, to address any watershed or finer scale issues, DWR needs smaller scale, more specific agricultural water withdrawal data to answer questions regarding local impacts to water resources. And this text has been revised to, agriculture is a major user of ground and surface water in the United States. According to the 2018 Water Use Survey published by NCBA and CS, water use in the Chowan River Basin averages approximately 2.613 million gallons per day, with a withdrawal capacity that totals 49.189 million gallons per day. In the Chowan River Basin, data is reported on the county and the watershed bucket scale. Data is available for 3 of the 5 counties located partially or entirely within the basin. But annual average daily groundwater withdrawal is not reported for one of the counties, and annual average daily surface water withdrawal is not reported for 2. Similarly, annual average daily groundwater use is reported for both the Chowan and the Meherrin, but annual average daily surface water use is only reported for the Chowan. Due to federal and state confidentiality laws surrounding agricultural production, the available data is aggregated While the aggregated data can be used to potentially answer statewide questions about the amount of water withdrawn, it is difficult to use in models to assess local conditions or impacts on water resources. To answer questions regarding water availability and consumption rate, finer scale site-specific agricultural water withdrawal data is needed. And for operations that rely heavily on water for irrigation, individual small-scale data can also help plan for future growth and allow for better management during drought conditions. The last revision is in section 8.6.5. That was titled Statewide Water Withdrawal Permitting. And the text reads as North Carolina General Statute 143-355 requires DWR to assure the availability of adequate supplies of water to protect public health and support economic growth. Water supply planning and management requires a basic understanding of both the available water resources and all the demands being placed on those resources. If DWR cannot monitor / measure all water uses, it lacks the ability to effectively manage the water resources for the long-term sustainability of the resource. According to the 2010 Water Allocation Study for the Environmental Review Commission, the PIs, or primary investigators, found that only North Carolina and 1 or 2 other states do not require permits for large water withdrawals. Many industrial and local government stakeholders recognize the value and certainty that state water withdrawal permits would provide to them. To ensure that future water supply needs can be met and to identify conflicts or problems that need to be resolved, water withdrawal permits for all water users should be implemented to allow DWR the ability to effectively plan, monitor, and manage water resources in North Carolina. So the section 8.6.5 has now been retitled to Identifying Data Gaps, and it reads, North Carolina General Statute 143-355 requires DWR to assure the availability of adequate supplies of water to protect public health and support economic growth. Water supply planning and management requires a basic understanding of both the available water resources and all the demands being placed on those resources. Strides have been made with existing statewide programs to capture water withdrawal from all classes of water users, but data gaps exist. Consequently, these data gaps do not allow DWR to accurately report the amount of water being withdrawn statewide. Collecting water use information from water users in all sectors is needed to fill in data gaps and allow DWR the ability to identify conflicts or problems that need to be resolved. Complete data sets are also needed to effectively plan and monitor and manage water resources in North Carolina to ensure future water supply needs can be met. Working collaboratively across all state and federal agencies to have an interest in water resources could help identify and fill in some of the data gaps and identify regional concerns and challenges. Small-scale water use data, however, is critical to solving local and regional issues. Being able to report more completely about water use in the state would add value and more certainty in answering questions about water availability, giving businesses, industries, and citizens more assurance that water needs can be met now and in the future.
Thank you, Forrest. Vice Chair Harris, would you like to follow up with any other remarks?
I appreciate Forrest reading those. I have little dogs in the background that decided to sound off, so thank you. I think it covers the discussions that we had and addresses the primary concern that I had received. So I appreciate staff and Forrest and everyone that worked on this.
Do any of the committee members have comments or questions before I seek consensus? Any concerns or reservations about these changes?
I just got a question, Madam Chair. This is Gillespie.
Yeah.
So is it 100,000 gallons a day that you have, if it's above that, you have to record that, or registered that, and then everything under that is sort of what they're talking about. Is that correct?
I'll ask the staff to answer that.
I'm not a subject matter expert on this topic. I would say that to accurately and factually answer your question, if Linwood Deal or Michelle Raquet or Harold Brady are on the line,
yes.
one of them.
Thank you, Forrest. This is Linwood Peel with the Water Supply Planning Branch. Commissioner Gillespie, your question is it the above 100,000 gallons a day or less is our concern? Remember, reporting to Division of Water Resources, agriculture only have to report if it's over 1 million gallons a day, and everyone else have to report if it's 100,000 gallons a day. The Ag Survey provide data that is less than, 1 million gallons a day and greater than 100,000 gallons a day to us. But as far as stated, the information is aggregated to a point that we can't use it locally. So when the concern for us is the data collection. If we get data and it's aggregated and someone asks us, which they do all the time, asks us in local areas, for instance, Neuse River in Johnston County, how much water, when we have an industry come along and said, how much water is available, looking at all other users, whether it's industry, business, water supply, or agriculture, how much water is available? We cannot answer any of those localized questions because the data is aggregated. And in some cases, some county data is star or asterisk where we can't get that information because 60% of the water in that usage is done by one owner, or if it's 3 owners or less, we can't get that data. That's the concern that we had, and we discussed thoroughly on Friday with Commissioner Harris and Commissioner Deerhay. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, and it explains a lot. So I've always been under the assumption that this data that you've been collecting has been coming from individuals that report it, in which you're telling me, and I know we've had compliance of heavily being in compliance as much as 97% volunteering to do this. But what I'm hearing from you is that when you get that data, you don't get it by individuals, you get it as aggregate of the whole county or whatever, and then you is that what you're saying to me?
Commissioner Gillespie, that's what we've been saying for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I have questions.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, sir. It's Mr. Carter.
Yes, let me follow up on Commissioner Gillespie's questions because I guess I'm a little bit unclear about some of the answer there. First of all, the 100,000 and the 1 million gallon thresholds that were mentioned, are those not for groundwater rather than surface water?
No, that's a statewide registration.
For surface water?
No, groundwater as well. For water withdrawal and registration program, we get groundwater or surface water from users, 100,000 gallons for non-agriculture and 1 million for agriculture statewide in our water withdrawal registration database. In our local water supply plan, it's different. We get all units of local government. It doesn't matter what size they are, and large community water systems, we get that data. And in the Central Coastal Plain, which you're referring to, which is totally different. It's more of a permitting program, which right. That's what I think you're talking about. You only get a permit for groundwater in the Central Coastal Plain. That's only 15 counties, but we're talking about a statewide registration of information. So that's two separate things. Commissioner Gillespie's question was statewide, how do we get data? And the program is set up 100,000 for non-agriculture, 1 million for agriculture. And what I was explaining was the Ag Survey. They provide, and it has been up, as Commissioner Gillespie said, as high as 95, 90%. I've heard numbers as high as 97% compliance. But what we've been saying for the last 10 years when it started, the data is aggregated in a point that we can't, when people ask us questions, whether it's the EMC or anyone else, we can answer those questions.
Okay, well, then aggregation is actually my second question here. If this data is required under that registration program, who is it submitted to?
Oh, okay, well, the registration program is submitted to us. Anything over 1 million is submitted to the Division of Water Resources, our water withdrawal and registration program. Any agriculture less than that is reported to the Department of Ag, their Ag survey, which is a confidential survey. What they gather the information through a survey, voluntary survey. They put the data together and make it aggregated. So I guess to be confidential to individual users.
All right. Well, what about the non-agricultural? There where you've got above 100,000 that are being reported.
Oh yes, that's all the information. We get all that information directly, individual site-specific data. Yes.
So the aggregation question that you're concerned about is what's going on over Department of Agriculture for the agricultural users under 1 million. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why? I guess is there some reason why Ag can't share that data with you?
Well, they share it to us under the confidential agreement, as I explained.
Then if it's being done under confidentiality, then you should have the data non-aggregated, I assume, correct?
No, we do not get it unaggregated. It's always aggregated. And that's the point we've been trying to explain. We can't use it for individual requests. One of the things in several of the programs we have, they ask, is water in the future going to be adequate in this area? We cannot answer that question. As much as we try, we cannot, because we cannot get that aggregated data deaggregated.
Well, I guess if it's being provided from Ag in some sort of confidential form, I guess I'm not clear why that can't be provided in a non-aggregated form.
I can pull up the actual written text, and I'm not an attorney. Maybe we should let Mr. Reynolds or someone else read it and explain it to you guys, to the commission.
I see Commissioner Monis while Mr. Peels.
Yeah, just, I'm not surprised. There are a lot of protections in place in a variety of areas to protect farmers' identities on different areas. So, Commissioner, that it doesn't particularly surprise me. I agree with the modifications to the CHOAN plan to move that forward. But I also think this is a really interesting conversation and maybe it would be a good future information item.
I agree. And if the members are willing to proceed with these revisions for today and for the purpose of the plan's approval, we can arrange to talk about this in greater depth in a separate information item. Are you agreeing with that, Commissioner Carter?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that because I don't think we need to get into a long-winded discussion today on this aggregation, but it sounds like there may be an issue here with the Department of Agriculture, or maybe there's some sort of statutory limitation in place that we need to take a look at, but we're not going to solve that today. I agree with Commissioner Monis' suggestion. Let's move ahead on this, but I do think we need to follow up on this question. But let me make one last point, I guess, and I will agree with that the changes are a vast improvement and we should go ahead. But I do have to say, I've never seen in my practice in quite a few years here, putting forward a permitting program simply on the basis of gathering data. That's not the reason you put a permitting program in place. Now, maybe we need refinements to the registration program or the data gathering and so on. That's where you get data. It's not through a permitting program. You're just adding a whole lot of additional bureaucracy if you slap a permitting program on a lot of folks, and it's really unnecessary. So that's the question you need to look at long and hard before we think about any kind of permitting issues here. That's why I think we need to follow up on this registration question and why the data that's being gathered is not adequate for the purpose.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. Are there any other comments from members? Well, then let me move to the procedural side. After the basin plan goes directly to the commission tomorrow for approval, I had thought that if the consent, no objections, that we would have a consensus recommendation to the full commission tomorrow from the committee to use the revisions that were presented today. Do any of the members believe we need to vote rather than have consensus approval?
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
This is
Carter.
Mr. Carter again. I don't think we have a basis, statutory basis for a vote. And at some point I may need to talk to Council Reynolds a little bit more about this. But in the note I sent y'all, I did point out that I think we do need some sort of a process here whereby the Committee of Jurisdiction has a further look at a plan or any sort of an action like this that's going forward to be recommended to the Commission. It doesn't make sense to me that you move from a draft which was 4 months ago. I know there were changes made in it. There was public comment that would accept it on it and so on. And it seems to me the committee that's involved with the particular plan or whatever kind of an action may be needs to have another look at it once it's finalized and before it goes to the commission. Now, we may have to make some adjustments procedurally to figure out how to exactly how to handle that. And maybe a formal vote like we do with the rule is not exactly the way to go. But I do think we need a further refinement in the process of how we deal with these kinds of matters. And this one just illustrates it because we had a real issue here with this permitting recommendation. So, this is really a discussion for going forward. It's not a discussion for today. But I think the commission needs to take a look at this and figure out some different way to handle these kinds of things. I don't know that water plans are the only, or basin plans are the only actions that fit into this category. That's another thing we probably ought to take a look at. But certainly this really illustrates a need with respect to these basin plans. But in any event, as I said, I concur with moving forward. And I don't think we need a formal vote.
Your point's well taken. You raise a very good point about the fact that there is a public comment process and revisions made between the time the Water Quality Committee sees it and it comes to the EMC. So, yes, perhaps it's something the Chairman's Steering Committee could look at in the future. So, if I'm not hearing any concerns raised by committee members with the revisions introduced today, I'm prepared to take consensus approval recommendation from the committee to the full commission tomorrow for approval as revised today. So tomorrow, I've already spoken with Chairman Myberg, and tomorrow we'll have a process that includes, by introducing the revision that came before us today, we will see the full presentation of the plan, which is a wonderfully detailed and very publicly accessible and understandable plan. I congratulate the staff on that. And then we'll also have the opportunity to review the revisions we discussed today and a motion that would include those revisions if the chairman and the commission so agrees. Any further discussion about this topic? So we'll make a recommendation to include the revisions in the plan tomorrow. Okay, great. Thank you so much to everyone. Special thanks to Vice Chair Harris and the staff for working with us. Now we move into Roman numeral 4, our information items. It's an update on the model program for the Neuse and Tarp Hamlico New Development Stormwater Program. This did not include a presentation package for us. So we have Tricia Darkant with a brief introduction to it. Forgive me if I mispronounced your name.
That's all right. I'm with Division of Water Resources, Non-Point Source Planning Branch, and I'm here to present you a status update on the model program for the NUS and Tar-Pamlico New Development Stormwater Rules. So to review the process and the products that the rules call for, the newly adopted rules were effective April 2020, and part of the package of the nutrient management strategy rules, the overall rules. The rules call for the development of a model program which captures the rule requirements through working with the local governments and to bring it to the Environmental Management Commission by 8 months, which that target would have been January 2021. Then the Environmental Management Commission would approve the model program. Local governments have either 6 or 12 months to submit programs, depending on whether they are current participants or new participants. Then they would submit them to us. We would work with them. The EMC then approves the local programs, and the local governments have 6 months to begin implementation. So the model program development process that we started with, and we started after we had all were working at home, was to do it through MS Teams, a consultative process with a preference for consensus. We had a large online group. It was about 40 to 50 people on each call. And for the most part, it was one-way interaction. We did invite, we set aside time for comments and questions, but we commonly would not get an awful lot of interaction. We had a request by local governments to coordinate with the NPDES Stormwater program because several of them, quite a lot of them, are municipal separate storm sewer system participants. So they're part of that program. And to review that program, MS4 programs started between when the original NUS and Tar-Pam rules began and now, so they were guided by session law in 2006. Many of those existing MS4s, several of them will be added after the 2020 census is complete. As it happens, there's a lot of overlap between the nutrient management strategy rules and the MS4 program elements. It's specific where they overlap is with post-construction stormwater, illicit discharge detection and elimination, and public education and outreach. So one of the stormwater rules that we know of, O2H 1017, MS4 post-construction stormwater requirements would defer to what are called qualifying alternative programs. And that includes water supply watershed, it includes NUS and Tar-Pam and the other nutrient management strategy, new development stormwater. In other words, these two, NUS and Tar-Pamlico, satisfy the MS4 post-construction requirements. And there's additional requirement that the MS4 program has to be updated to address pollutants of concern. So that would be nitrogen and phosphorus. So we worked with Demler on creation of an MS4 style stormwater management plan. So they have a very formalized, structured document that helps connect the particular statements and requirements of the MS4 permit for each permittee to an actual implementation plan. And so since our nutrient management strategy, stormwater, would kind of stand in for their post-construction stormwater, we wanted to make sure that we were structuring our requirements or how local programs would state their requirements or what they were doing in a similar way. So pointing out, we had a group of MS4 communities ask us to try to combine these, and we had a small subcommittee of interested parties come together for fleshing out what we're calling this nutrient management strategy stormwater management plan, a merged document that combines the two of them. We had ongoing monthly MS Teams program team meetings through this, and these this small work group happened in August, September. But again, we were not getting a lot of participation or a lot of input on those monthly meetings. So what we finally did is we started having one-on-one calls between myself and the local government staff to try to understand their concerns much more directly. And that has proven to be dramatic improvement in communication and understanding what each situation is. We have a very large variety of local governments, from those that have been implementing stormwater for a couple, 3 decades now, to those that are brand new participants that have only a very minimal stormwater program at the present time. So what we are doing at the moment is we're wrapping up implementation guidance and an example nutrient management strategy, stormwater management plan, and to bring it to the local governments for their final endorsement. So we would bring this to you, if they're good with it, to the Water Quality Committee and then the EMC in March. So one of the questions is, why would we need to endorse or adjust the model program, revise it, other than in the rule it states we need to create one? So the Neuse and Tar-Pamlico original rules were effective in 1998 and 2001. And in between to the new rules that were adopted, there were quite a few changes in and additions to the rule that were sufficient enough to need guidance. The original rules left a lot to interpretation. We actually had to put a lot of this guidance into the model program. Since then, the stormwater rules have become much more mature. The MS4 program has become much more mature, and we have a much better understanding of what makes for a good and effective stormwater program. So some of the requirements were moved to rules. And then there were some technical requirements, otherwise more detailed. So the new model program would provide significantly more in-depth implementation guidance. And in particular, it would be helping a lot of these local governments that have that interaction between MS4 and nutrient management strategy. So, and to point out, we originally had 15 Neuse communities and 11 Tar-Pamlico communities, and we're adding 14 new Neuse local governments and 1 new Tar-Pamlico local government. So as I pointed out, there's a lot of overlap between the MS4 and nutrient management strategy. And we have learned over the past 20 years a lot of things that go into a good, productive, efficient stormwater program. And so we want to try to streamline these 2 programs to allow them to have a single program and a single annual reporting process. And the MS4 program has a very good, very tight report, which is tightly related to their local program. So there's not a lot of writing, they just have metrics that they're reporting on. And this provides a ready-made program format for the Neuse and Tar-Pam local governments. What we would point out, though, is that this is an example local program. Local programs are, if they feel that they don't want to use this format and they think that they can describe what they're doing and how they're going about it in a better way, then that's what they do. So to recap, the revised Neuse and Tar-Pamlico rules called for a new model program. We've had monthly group meetings, but we've changed to more effective one-on-one interactions. We're developing a model program that integrates well with the NPDES MS4 program. We will be running guidance and local program examples by the local governments for any remaining concerns. And then we will bring it to the Water Quality Committee and the Environmental Management Commission in March. And if you have any questions, thank you. You're muted.
I would say the, am I, okay. Well, I think somebody's overriding us here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think the earlier we can see this the better. As you saw, we saw 2 months of presentations or to the Falls Lake model program. So giving us plenty of time to review and understand. Is there any date deadline leading to wanting to have both the Water Quality Committee and the EMC approved in March?
Any particular date deadline? Why March, or
the fact that you want to move the next day to the EMC?
Mostly just to get it moving along. We had the original goal of getting it approved within 8 months, and that's later than we'd like.
Okay. How extensive is it going to take? A good deal of walkthrough by you all for us to follow it?
For you, so I'm going to assume that you do not have any familiarity with the NPDES MS4 program or what their stormwater management plan consists of. So yes, it could be very, very detailed. We've made the attempt to try to use the MS4 program as a jumping off point and to use mostly similar sorts of requirements and recommendations to what they have. But since that would be new to you too, we'd have to run through that. And then we have a shorter set of guidelines for both how to fill in this document, as well as if you want to use a different format, what we need to see to understand your program, and as well as any, there's been a lot of questions about how to interpret some of these rules for very fine particular reasons, and so we're trying to make sure those are all fleshed out. So it could take some time, but I don't have a good idea right now of how long it could take to explain to you. At least in our meetings with the local governments, easily it was probably half an hour or more to go through it.
Well, we'll see how well received it is by the committee in March, and as to whether or not we want to recommend going the next day to the EMC. Any previews you could give us to give members get early feedback to me on their whether they're inclined to take it the next day to the EMC or not would probably be helpful for you also to know.
Great.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment on this? Okay, then we have a second information item, and it is on the North Carolina Nutrient Criteria Development Plan, a summary and status update on High Rock Lake. As some of you may remember, we thought we were going to be hearing High Rock Lake this month. It will be heard in March, and the planning branch director or supervisor, Karen Higgins, is going to give us an update about that.
Good afternoon, and Shelton, if I could share my screen. Great. Okay. So can you all see my slides?
Yes.
All right, great. So as Commissioner Deerhake mentioned, I'm Karen Higgins at the Division of Water Resources, Water Planning section, and I'm going to provide just a brief summary and status update for High Rock Lake, just to kind of set the stage as we move forward through this process. So let me start with a little bit of a history about nutrient criteria development in North Carolina. In 2001, EPA issued a federal register notice encouraging the states to develop nutrient management plans. And in response to this, North Carolina developed the Nutrient Criteria Implementation Plan in 2004. In 2011, EPA issued a memo to the regions reemphasizing the need for nutrient reductions. And so moving forward with that to gain stakeholder input on nutrient reductions, a North Carolina forum on nutrient over-enrichment was held in 2012. We incorporated the stakeholder comments and established the nutrient criteria development plan in 2014. And that plan was renewed in 2019, incorporating updates and schedule revisions. And you can see on the slide, the bullets that have a little star next to it are things that have been approved by EPA throughout the process. The Nutrient Criteria Development Plan is a plan for developing nutrient criteria for surface waters in North Carolina by linking the criteria to the designated uses of the water body, and this includes downstream uses. These uses include being fishable, swimmable, and boatable, as well as special uses such as trout waters, primary nursery areas, and public water supplies. The plan includes evaluating causal and response variables such as nitrogen and phosphorus, chlorophyll A, pH, dissolved oxygen, things like that. The plan also allows for the criteria to be expressed numerically or narratively with a numerical translator. The NCDP recognizes that different water body types warrant different nutrient criteria due to characteristics such as landscape position, flow dynamics, and sensitive species. The plan commits to developing separate criteria for lakes and reservoirs, rivers and streams, and estuaries. One pilot water body for each type was chosen for criteria development. Then based off of each pilot study, criteria could be developed for similar water body types. The pilot water bodies are shown here. High Rock Lake, Central Cape Fear River, and Albemarle Sound. The Albemarle Sound was expanded to include the Chowan River as well. The Scientific Advisory Council, or the SAC, was established in the 2014 NCDP to assist DWR with the development of scientifically defensible nutrient criteria. Members include experts in water quality, nutrient response variables, nutrient management, and nutrient abatement. The Criteria Implementation Committee was established in 2015 to advise DWR on the social and fiscal impacts of proposed nutrient criteria. Members include economists, academics, and stakeholder representatives such as local governments and agriculture. So ongoing eutrophication concerns led to recommendations for a nutrient management strategy for High Rock Lake in the early 1990s. High Rock was first listed as impaired for chlorophyll A in 2004. An intensive monitoring contract was awarded to the Yadkin-Petey River Basin Association with data collection from 2008 to 2010. Samples were collected in the lake as well as the watershed on a routine basis and in response to high flow events in the watershed. The data were used to characterize both the lake and the watershed responses to various stimuli, including seasonal weather changes. The Watershed Model final report was issued in 2012. The Watershed Model links conditions and activities on the land surface to responses in the streams and delivery to the lake. The Nutrient Response Model, which provides information on the responses of High Rock Lake to nutrient loading, was completed in 2016. We began consultation with the SAC in 2015, and they met more than 20 times since regarding High Rock Lake. The final recommendations for High Rock Lake from the SAC was issued in May 2020. The CIC also started meeting in 2015, and they have met approximately 11 times. So looking forward, as Commissioner Deerhake indicated, we hope to bring an action item to the Water Quality Committee for a site-specific standard for chlorophyll A for High Rock Lake, requesting that it go to the full EMC in May. From there, we'll proceed through the rulemaking, going out to public notice this summer, and hopefully coming back to the full commission for adoption at the end of the year. Once the site-specific standard is approved by the EMC, it goes to the RRC for their approval, as well as EPA. Once the new site-specific standard is fully approved, we will need to incorporate the assessment methodology for the new site-specific standard for High Rock. This will be done as part of the 2024 303D listing and delisting methodology, and that approval goes through the EMC in 2023. So there's several different steps through the process and several connected pieces, but it'll all come through the EMC in the various steps. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And also on the line is Jim Hawkey, who is managing the NCDP process for DWR.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any questions from members? Not seeing any hands up, not hearing any voices. Just as a refresher, this was originally going to be a part of the triennial review regulatory package. It's been broken out because we are going to hear triennial review before the EMC in March, but we'll only be hearing High Rock before Water Quality Committee in March. So the hope is that they will both be finalized before the end of 2021. But I did want to point that out to you. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not hearing any questions or seeing any raised hands, so we'll move on. Thanks for the presentation. I'll just have a standing item on our agenda of future committee interests. I wanted to let the committee members know that I've gone back and reviewed that list that we originally had, and I have put a column beside it on status. And so I'll be distributing that to you just to give you an update of the progress that we're making on that list with various actions since 2020 began. So I'll be sending that to you in the coming days.
Mary, Commissioner Deerhake, this is Stan. I just want to thank you for sending out this planning calendar. It's really it's very accessible. And while I suspect that data for the other committees is available, if I were smart enough to go in and sort of look at all the different schedules and tracking systems that the department does, this was both really accessible. It also made me look at the March commission meeting and think, man, that's a lot of heavy lifts. So you'll take over from Commissioner Bailey as the lead organizer for commission meetings here. It looks like in the near future.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to thank Adrian and Karen for putting together this calendar for us. Of course, it's a living document. There will be changes along the way, most likely. But I did want to thank Adrian. And note that at the end of that, on page 2, there are 4 bullets of topics that I've told I would like to come to us as information items. And I think the Executive Order 80 we will hear in March. What I'm asking for there is for staff to help us understand if there are any actions that the Water Quality Committee could or should take to help with the implementation to assure its success. The second bullet maybe needs a bit more clarification. It says rule consolidation procedures. What's intended there was supposed to be a discussion about whether or not there is a need for procedural rules on dealing with municipal wastewater treatment system consolidations, as we found with the Asheville-Hendersonville consolidation. That was new territory for us. And so if there's any way we can standardize procedures on that through rulemaking, we just want to explore that. So that'll be an information item in the upcoming months. So that brings us to the final part of our agenda, where we give committee members an opportunity to offer any closing thoughts. Commissioner Carter, do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, I think we covered everything. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis?
No, nothing else. Thank you.
Commissioner Phillips?
The only thing I'm interested in is in our last meeting, we sort of left the wetlands issue. We thought we was going to be moving forward with that, and then all of a sudden it came to an abrupt halt. And that's okay, I guess. I'd asked staff to have someone from the department to call me, and they've never called me to discuss this as far as what their goals were and objectives were going to be from here going forward. So I think that's definitely something that we need to hear from the department, and needs to be probably on our agenda of things to do, discuss. And I would normally be sort of, okay, it's gone away and we'll just wait for it to come back up and let things ride. However, I think there's an issue by having that done like that. And the issue is that you've got potentially lots of folks out there that are trying to do projects, developments, or mining or agriculture or whatever, and could potentially be shut down and not able to move forward on these projects because of the way we left that subject. And so my biggest concern is how many projects are out there that are not able to move forward because of the actions that we took and the actions that we didn't take. And so I think that's real critical, because I don't think as EMC members we should ignore if there's potential problems out here in the state that we're, me as a member, I don't know what the department's doing. I just raised that concern, and hopefully if Director Smith is still on there, he can sort of give me some answers to that.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. And I realize that I overlooked recognizing Director Smith for his closing remarks. And so we'll do that as soon as I go through the rest of the commission members. And I do hope that we'll have an update of some form in March, but perhaps he can also update us today. So just to round out our list of commissioners' comments before we return to Director Smith, Mr. McAdams, Commissioner McAdams.
No further comments?
I will say that I attended as a visitor, and there was discussion about the Fuquay-Varina proposed interbasin transfer, and that there were some public comments from the early public meetings held about water quality, and Commissioner Keene thought that that might be something that the Quality Committee, in addition to water allocation, want to be aware of. I trust that Chair McAdams and the Water Allocation Committee will work with us and bring to our attention any water quality issues that they think we need to address.
Well, yes, indeed, Madam Chairman. Good point. And I said in the Water Allocation Committee meeting that what I wanted to do is schedule a special called meeting to dig into just the issues that arise in interbasin transfer applications. As I explained then, partly for my own benefit, because I have agreed to be the hearing officer, yet this is the first of these that I will have been through, and others on the commission have been through several others in the past. But to go through actually the several findings of fact that need to be made if we're ultimately going to approve an IBT, and to share our war stories on that would be very, very helpful to the process. And I think perhaps to some extent to everybody on the commission. If the Water Quality Committee would wish to meet jointly with the Water Allocation Committee on such a called meeting, we can certainly arrange that to be the case.
Well, thank you. I think extending the invitation would be great. And we have multiple Water Quality Committee members who also sit on water allocation, so it won't be a significant number of increasing members to have to attend. So thank you.
Well, great, but all would be welcome. Yeah, okay, we'll do that. Thank you.
Commissioner Monas.
Just quickly, I just want to recognize that we heard a couple of really nice examples today of collaboration between the division and local governments and others to come up with solutions that work for everybody. And I appreciate that, and that makes our jobs easier. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Harris.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak today on that earlier concern. But I just want to build on Commissioner Monas's comment that I would like maybe some informational items out in the future, and I'll share those with you offline, but maybe looking at some of the non-point source programs that utilize the voluntary approach. I'm learning a lot about the regulatory and permitting world, but a lot of good work, and I'm a proponent of voluntary approach to address issues. But I think maybe that would be in order. And so I'll share with you some programs I'm aware of. Just like I do serve both on the Water Allocation and the Water Quality Committee. And so at some point, I think it would be good to hear some of these other tools like the Ag Water Use Plan and really kind of go into that and look at some of the work that's going on in that as well with reporting at lower levels. And we talk about all the things that don't work, like the aggregate data, but there's a lot of good work going on as well. So I just offer those two pieces for both of these groups to maybe kind of take a look at. So thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Mott.
No comments, thank you.
Director Smith, Director Smith, what would you like?
Hey, good morning. I hope you can hear me. I'm having some connectivity issues this morning, but I hope everybody can hear me. Anyway, thank you, Commissioner Duke. I do have a couple items I'd like to go over. One of the, particularly given how conditions are this January with COVID, I just want to take and revisit and maybe reinforce our Division of Water Resources efforts with respect to being safe in the workplace. We have 7 regional offices, water sciences sections, both a chem lab and more of a field sciences section within that, and obviously work in our central office in the Archdale building. And from the staff, the supervisors, and the branch chiefs, we're all doing our best to really take advantage and to work remotely as much as possible to help ensure kind of a safe workplace. Important, in place and in play in the field. We're doing inspections, we're doing investigating of complaints and sampling and spill and emergency responses. So those work efforts are still certainly ongoing, as well as providing assistance to our regulated communities and permittees. But I just wanted to take a second and talk about how serious we are about the social distancing and mask and PPE, and to ensure that both not only our field work but our workplace efforts are as safe as we can be. So that's one item. Another item I wanted to mention is that the North Carolina Manufacturers Association, NCMA, has a presentation, or has a workshop in February. That's typically happens every February, and we're going to be participating in that this February, but it will be remotely. So we have regional supervisors right now that are preparing for panel discussions for this workshop, and we'll have staff from our permitting section and planning sections and groundwater resources sections also participating in the presentation and providing a host of items that cover water quality permitting topics. So I do have a few more items, but I'll save those for the and then my best to help address Commissioner Gillespie's concern. I guess during the September Water Quality Committee, staff presented changes to the federal rule, the navigable water rule. I guess the business end of that presentation was the federal rule left the Division of Water Resources with a permitting gap. Hence the need for a temporary rule. That's pretty, at the end of the day, that was the instance or the essence of the presentation. But since then, there has been a lot of questions from commission members, EMC members, stakeholders, so much so that we've taken that to these over and develop information items for stakeholders on function, flooding, like storm event resiliency, estuary function, water quality, and statewide permitting gap. And so that's where we are right now. Commissioner Gillespie mentioned specifically, how many projects are out there. That's a conversation I had with Paul Wachowski this past week. It wasn't this week, it was week before. And what was explained to me that ain't come up with, because we know of a fair number of projects, but we don't have the applications in house. A lot of that has to do with us anticipate the consultants or the applicant trying to sort through the remedy that be it a temporary rule or whatever, what that remedy is going to be. So a specific answer is how many of them are there is we don't have a real number that I can actually give you that gives you an accurate account of that or precise account. So anyway, that's all the information I have today. I don't, Commissioner Gillespie may have something else he wants to ask, but that's all I have. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the suggestions for other future information items and future discussion. If there are no other comments from members, I thank everyone for their attendance and participation today. And our next meeting will be in March. I look forward to seeing everyone at the EMC meeting tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Shelton. Hey.
Hey, can you mute yourself, please?